Capricorn, Capricorn. Say this once, and they're gone for good. Number 5 will shock you. Do you know someone who is a Capricorn? Then pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because this could save your most important relationships. Capricorns are known for their unwavering loyalty, stone-cold patience, and ability to forgive almost anything. But there is a limit. And when that limit is crossed, there's no going back. No pleading, no apology, no promise of change will bring a Capricorn back after you cross that invisible line. The problem? Most people have no idea where that line is until it's too late. In this video, I'm going to reveal the 5 deadly phrases that will make a Capricorn delete you from their life forever. And believe me, number 5 will shock you, because it's something many people say thinking they're being sincere or funny. Capricorns don't make a scene. They don't fight, they don't yell, they don't throw plates. They simply disappear. They turn the page and never look back. That friend of decades? That relationship of years? That family member? It's over. And it's not a matter of pride, it's a matter of self-respect. I've seen countless people destroy precious connections with Capricorns without even realizing what they were doing. And the worst part is, when they finally realize it, it's already too late. So if you have a Capricorn in your life and want to keep them close, or if you yourself are a Capricorn and want to better understand your own reactions, keep watching. Because what you're about to discover could completely change the way you communicate with the most persistent and loyal people of the Zodiac. But before we begin this journey through words that should never be said, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Because what you're about to discover here could save your most precious relationships. And if you're a Capricorn, you'll finally understand why some words hurt you so much. The first sentence that destroys a Capricorn is seemingly simple. You're too cold. 3 words. 3 stabs straight to the heart of someone who spends their whole life trying to prove otherwise. Have you ever stopped to think about what it means to be called cold when you feel everything with an intensity that almost paralyzes you? Capricorns aren't cold. They're careful. They're prudent. They're people who have learned, often through pain, that not every feeling needs to be a public spectacle. Imagine a dam. On the outside, solid concrete, an imposing structure, an unshakable appearance. But inside, an entire ocean of deep waters, contained only by the force of the dam itself. When you call a Capricorn cold, you're ignoring that entire inner ocean. You're saying that the way they protect their feelings is a character flaw. And here's the truth that cuts through. Capricorns demonstrate love through responsibility. While other signs say, I love you, with flowers and poetry, Capricorns say it by paying the bills, solving problems, being there during tough times. They build. They provide. They stay when everyone else has left. But do you know what happens when a Capricorn hears they're too cold? Something devastating happens. They realize their love language isn't being heard. That all the effort, all the silent dedication, all the invisible sacrifice counts for nothing. And they start to wonder, if loving the way I know how to love isn't enough, then why keep trying? There's a stark difference between being cold and being reserved, between not feeling and feeling so intensely that you need walls to keep from falling apart. Capricorns carry an ancestral fear of vulnerability because, at some point in their lives, they learned that showing weakness is dangerous. That depending emotionally on someone can mean disappointment. When you call a Capricorn cold, you're not just criticizing a behavior. You're invalidating their entire emotional existence. You're saying their way of loving is wrong. And for someone who already constantly doubts whether they're worthy of love, this is confirmation of their worst fears. They won't yell at you. They won't cry or make a scene. But something dies in that moment. The hope of being understood. The belief that you are capable of seeing beyond the surface. And slowly, without you realizing it, they begin to drift away. Not with anger, but with a silent sadness that turns into indifference. Because here's a secret that few people understand. Capricorns don't ask for much, they just want to be seen, recognized, valued for who they are, not for who others think they should be. And when that visibility is denied, when they are reduced to a cold and heartless stereotype, they simply decide that it's not worth continuing to try. And it is precisely at this moment that Capricorn begins to quietly withdraw. Did I end the next video? You'll understand what happens after that decision, and why almost no one realizes it until it's too late. And do you know what's most tragic behind this accusation of coldness? There is someone who feels with an oceanic depth, someone who cherishes every word, every gesture, every moment. Someone whose loyalty is as solid as a diamond. But you'll never know that, because by calling them cold, you close the only door that could have led you to that emotional treasure. The second fatal phrase is even more venomous. You think you're better than everyone else. And this phrase is particularly cruel because it hits exactly where Capricorns are most vulnerable, even when they seem completely confident. Let's talk about the image that Capricorn projects to the world. Disciplined, successful, organized, competent. They arrive at places and naturally assume responsibilities. They have high standards, do not accept mediocrity, demand excellence from themselves, and expect the same from others. Outwardly, they seem to climb mountains effortlessly, as if success were their innate nature. But do you want to know the truth hidden behind that flawless facade? Absolute terror of not being good enough. Capricorns don't have high standards because they think they're superior. They have high standards because they're constantly trying to prove to themselves that they have value. Every achievement is an attempt to fill an inner void that whispers, "You haven't done enough yet." Every title, every recognition, every goal achieved is a temporary armor against the feeling of inadequacy that has always haunted them. Imagine climbing an endless mountain. You look up and the summit seems further and further away, no matter how many steps you take. You look down and you're afraid of falling, so you can't even stop to rest. That's the inner world of a Capricorn, a perpetual quest for approval that never comes, for a feeling of "I finally made it" that always slips through their fingers. And then you come along and say they think they're better than everyone else. Do you know what happens at that moment? The entire emotional structure they've built crumbles. Because you've just transformed their struggle into arrogance. You've taken their deepest insecurity and painted it as superiority. You didn't see the frightened child behind the successful adult. Here's the stark truth. Capricorns don't want to be better than you. They want to be good enough to deserve to exist, to deserve love, to deserve respect. And when you accuse them of arrogance, you're saying that even their efforts to be worthy are a flaw. There's a difference between having standards and thinking you're superior. Capricorns don't look down on others. They look at themselves with a relentless, unwavering self-criticism. That mental list of things they need to improve. That inner voice that says it's still not enough. That feeling that if they stop trying, they'll completely fall apart. When you accuse a Capricorn of thinking they're better than everyone else, you're revealing that you've never looked beyond the surface. That you saw the competence, but not the emotional cost of that competence. That you admired the results, but ignored the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the paralyzing fear of failure. And do you know what a Capricorn does when they realize you can't truly see them? They stop trying to explain. They stop trying to justify themselves. Because deep down they expected it. They expected to be misunderstood. They expected their qualities to be turned into flaws. It's just further confirmation that they were right not to fully trust anyone. The devastating irony is that while the world sees a Capricorn safely climbing the ladder of success, inside they are wondering if they will ever be good enough to simply be loved without having to prove anything. And when you accuse them of arrogance, you are saying no. That even their best efforts are viewed with suspicion and resentment. And so, another person is cut out of their lives. Not with drama, not with confrontation, just with a silent decision that it's not worth exposing themselves to someone who will never understand. That it's safer to be alone than to be with someone who turns their wounds into weapons against them. The third phrase that breaks the connection forever is, "You never have time for anything." And this phrase is particularly painful because it touches on the central conflict of a Capricorn's existence, the constant war between responsibility and the desire for connection. Have you ever wondered what it means to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders since childhood? Capricorns are those who mature too quickly, who have seen their families or themselves in difficult situations and have decided, consciously or unconsciously, that they will never again allow that vulnerability. They have become the rock, the anchor, the problem solver. And here is the invisible price of all this effort. Time ceases to belong to them. Every hour becomes an obligation. Every free moment is tainted by the guilt of not producing, not building, not guaranteeing security for the future. It's like living with an internal clock that never stops demanding. Did you do enough today? Did you secure tomorrow? Did you protect those you love? When you tell a Capricorn that they never have time for anything, you're accusing them of not caring. But the truth is quite the opposite. They care so much that they sacrifice themselves. They work tirelessly, precisely, to create a future where the people they love will be safe. Their physical absence is often a presence in the form of protection. Imagine an ant carrying a weight 10 times greater than its own body. Exhausted but determined. Climbing, always climbing. Because stopping means everything collapses. That's the experience of a Capricorn. They don't choose to be busy out of selfishness. They are busy because they believe that's how they demonstrate love, how they fulfill their purpose, how they justify their existence. But do you know what breaks their hearts? It's that, beneath all that armor of responsibility, there's someone desperate for connection. Someone who fantasizes about having free time, about spontaneous moments, about simply being able to be without having to do. Someone who looks at other people enjoying life and feels a silent envy mixed with guilt for not being able to do the same. Capricorns want to have time. They want to be present. They want those long conversations until the early hours of the morning, those aimless walks, those moments of pure lightness. But there's a tyrannical voice inside them that says, "You don't deserve to rest yet. You haven't done enough. If you stop, everything will fall apart." When you accuse them of not having time for anything, you're ignoring the invisible sacrifice. You're saying their effort doesn't count, that working to build stability, to create a secure future, to fulfill responsibilities isn't a form of love. And that cuts deep because, for Capricorn, responsibility is love. There is a silent tragedy in the life of a Capricorn. They work so hard to create security for the people they love that they end up losing those people in the process. They get tired of waiting. They interpret absence as indifference. They fail to see that every extra hour of work is an hour invested in building something solid to share together. And when you throw in their face that they never have time, something breaks. Because they realize that you don't value the kind of presence they offer. You want the light-hearted, carefree, spontaneous version of them, without understanding that this version cannot exist while there are unfulfilled responsibilities. Without understanding that for a Capricorn to relax without having finished their obligations is almost physically impossible. The painful truth is that Capricorns already feel guilty for not being more present. They already criticize themselves internally for not being able to perfectly balance work and personal life. They already wonder if they are making the right choice. And when you transform that internal guilt into an external accusation, you confirm their worst fear, that no matter how hard they try, it will never be enough. That they will die alone because no one has the patience to wait until they finally allow themselves to rest. And then the worst happens. They decide that, since they're going to be alone anyway, it's better to be truly alone. At least that way they don't have to carry the guilt of disappointing anyone else. At least that way they can dedicate themselves fully to their work without hearing complaints. And you? You become just another person who couldn't understand that their absence wasn't disinterest, it was fear. Fear of failing. Fear of not being enough. Fear of falling apart. Before we continue with the last two revelations, I need to ask you an important question. The viewer. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever been misunderstood like this? Have you ever felt judged for characteristics that are actually your way of protecting yourself? If you're a Capricorn, leave a comment telling us which of these phrases you've heard and how you felt. And if you know a Capricorn, tell us. Have you ever said any of these things without realizing the impact it would have? This conversation needs to happen. Because true understanding begins when we stop judging appearances and start seeing the invisible pain that each person carries. So go to the comments and share your experience. Let's create a community of people who choose to understand instead of judging. And now prepare your heart, because the next two topics are the most profound and revealing of all. The fourth phrase that will drive a Capricorn away forever is, "You don't know how to have fun." It seems harmless, almost like a friendly tease. But for a Capricorn, this phrase is like saying, "Your existence is too much for me." Let's delve into the unspoken truth about Capricorns and fun. It's not that they don't know how to have fun. It's not that they don't want lightness, joy, spontaneity. It's that there's a deep, almost primal guilt that prevents them from fully surrendering to purposeless pleasure. Think about it. What does it mean to grow up feeling like you need to justify every moment of your existence? That relaxing is laziness. That laughing too loudly is irresponsible. That enjoying the present means neglecting the future. Capricorns carry a severe internal morality that transforms even moments of joy into something that needs to be earned. It's as if there's a relentless inner judge who never sleeps. Every time a Capricorn tries to let loose, to genuinely have fun, to lower their guard, this judge whispers, "You haven't finished your tasks. You shouldn't be relaxing. What if something goes wrong while you're having fun? What if you're judged as irresponsible?" When you tell a Capricorn that they don't know how to have fun, you're attacking their greatest source of shame. Because they do know. They know they're too serious. They know they overthink. They know they overanalyze. And they hate that about themselves. Every day they fight against this controlling nature that prevents them from simply flowing with life. Here's what you don't see. Capricorns experience fun differently. They find enjoyment in solving complex problems, planning for the future, building something that will last, completing a task perfectly. It's a different kind of satisfaction, deeper, more lasting, but less visible to others. But do you know what happens when their fun isn't recognized as valid? When they're constantly compared to people who are more lighthearted and spontaneous? When their way of experiencing joy is treated as inferior, they start to feel flawed, as if there's something fundamentally wrong with them, as if they were machines instead of humans. There's a secret fantasy that almost every Capricorn carries. The fantasy of waking up one day and not caring what others think, not caring about responsibilities, simply existing without weight, without demands, without that constant need to be in control. But this fantasy is always accompanied by terror, because without control, who are they? Without productivity, what is their value? When you accuse a Capricorn of not knowing how to have fun, you're asking them to be someone they're not. You're saying their essence is insufficient, that they need to fundamentally change to be accepted. And that's devastating because, unlike other signs that might try to mold themselves to please others, Capricorn knows they can't. They know their serious nature isn't a choice. It's a deep-seated personality trait. The tragedy here is that behind this seriousness lies a child who was never allowed to be a child, who assumed adult responsibilities too early, who learned that the world is a place where you need to be prepared, attentive, vigilant, who never had the security of being able to be silly, foolish, carefree, without consequences. And now, as adults, when they finally have the opportunity to allow themselves this lightness, they can't. The programming is too deep. The fear is too old. And when you point to this fear as a character flaw, when you turn your inability to relax into a personal criticism, you are poking at a wound that never healed. Capricorns don't need someone to accuse them of not knowing how to have fun. They need someone who understands that for them, fun comes with safety. That they can let loose when they know everything is under control. That they can laugh when they are sure there will be no consequences. They need someone patient enough to understand that inviting them to simply relax is like asking someone afraid of heights to skydive. When you tell them they don't know how to have fun and then abandon them for it, you confirm their most toxic belief, that they are too burdensome to be loved, that their serious nature condemns them to loneliness, that they will never find someone who accepts them for who they really are, with all their limitations and fears. And so, they withdraw even further. They build even higher walls. They decide it's safer to be alone than to try to fit into a world that values a lightness they simply cannot achieve. And you? You become yet another example that being alone is the only real option. And we've arrived at the fifth and most devastating phrase, the one I promised would shock you. You're going to die alone like this. People say this casually. They say it thinking they're giving a touch of reality. They say it as if it were an incentive for Capricorn to change. But what they're really doing is materializing the most terrifying nightmare that dwells in the heart of every Capricorn. Let's talk about what nobody talks about, Capricorn's existential fear. Behind all that appearance of self-sufficiency, all that proud independence, all that ability to be alone without falling apart, lies an absolute and paralyzing terror of eternal loneliness. Capricorns build fortresses. They create structures. They accumulate achievements. And do you know why? Because deep down in their souls, there's a question that never goes away. If I'm not useful, if I'm not strong, if I'm not the one who solves everything, who will want to be with me? They learned very early on that love is conditional. That people stay as long as you are functional, productive, reliable. That affection needs to be earned through actions, never just by existing. So they became indispensable. The person everyone looks for when they need help. The rock that supports everyone. Because if they are not needed, they will be disposable. When you tell a Capricorn that they're going to die alone like that, you're not making an observation. You're confirming their deepest terror. You're saying aloud the sentence they already repeat to themselves on every sleepless night. You're turning their inner nightmare into an external reality. Do you know the cruel irony in all of this? Capricorns choose solitude to avoid abandonment. They distance themselves first so they won't be abandoned later. They build walls so high that no one can climb them, and then they feel safe in the certainty that, at least, they won't be caught off guard when people leave. Because people always leave, right? It's just a matter of time. There's a distorted emotional math going on here. If I distance myself first, if I don't need anyone, if I prove I can survive alone, then when loneliness comes, it won't hurt as much. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They create the exact situation they fear most because they believe it's inevitable anyway. When you throw that prophecy in their faces, when you tell them they're going to die alone, you're taking away even the illusion of control they have. You're saying that no matter how carefully they prepare for loneliness, it's going to hurt just the same. That all the protective mechanisms they've built are useless. And that's paralyzing. Here's what breaks your heart. Capricorns don't want to be alone. They desperately crave connection. They want someone to stay when things get tough. They want someone to see through the walls they've built and decide to stay anyway. They want proof that unconditional love exists, that they don't need to earn affection every day, that they can be vulnerable without being destroyed. But their life experiences taught them the opposite. They taught them that vulnerability is dangerous, that needing someone gives that person the power to hurt you, that it's safer to be the strong person than the person who needs strength. So they choose solitude as the least painful option, not because they prefer it, but because at least it's a pain they can control. And when you say that they will die alone, you are not planting a new idea. You are watering a seed that has already grown deep roots. You are validating the destructive narrative that they fight against every day. You are being the external voice that confirms the internal voice that tortures them. Do you know what's most tragic? This phrase usually comes from people who claim to care. It comes from frustrated friends, exhausted partners, worried family members. It comes from a place of wanting to provoke change. But the effect is exactly the opposite. Instead of inspiring Capricorn to open up, this phrase makes them shut down completely. Because it confirms what they've always known, that who they are at their core isn't enough. And here is the final breaking point. When a Capricorn hears this, especially coming from someone they let in, something inside them dies. Hope. The small flame of possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could be loved as they are. This phrase extinguishes that flame. And in the darkness that remains, only one decision is left. If loneliness is inevitable, it's best to embrace it on their own terms. They don't fight. They don't cry. They don't beg you to take back your words. They simply agree, silently, and they begin the process of removing you from their lives. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. If you've already decided that their destiny is loneliness, why prove otherwise? Why continue exposing yourself to someone who has already written the ending of the story? The most painful truth of all is that Capricorns die a little inside every time someone says that. And each small death brings them closer to the prophecy. They become more closed off, more distrustful, more convinced that they were right from the beginning. And the cycle perpetuates itself, not because they want it to, but because they don't know how to break it without risking a pain they believe they cannot survive. And here we are. 5 sentences. 5 knives straight to the heart of someone you thought was unshakable. Capricorns carry an impossible paradox. They are too strong to be comforted and too sensitive to be understood. They build mountains to prove their worth, but what they really want is for someone to see beyond the mountains and love the exhausted person who is climbing them. There is a frightened child inside every adult Capricorn. A child who still hopes someone will say, "You can rest now. You've done enough. You are loved not for what you do, but for who you are." But that child is buried under layers of responsibility, protected by walls of self-sufficiency, hidden behind a mask of control. And when you say those 5 phrases, you're attacking not the armor, but the vulnerable child behind it. You're saying that even their survival mechanisms are flawed, that the way they've learned to exist in the world is insufficient, that they will never be loved as they are. The devastating truth is that Capricorns don't ask to be saved. They only ask to be seen, recognized, valued not despite their characteristics, but because of them. They want someone who understands that emotional reserve isn't coldness, that responsibility isn't arrogance, that busyness isn't neglect, that seriousness isn't an inability to be happy, and that walls don't mean there's no door. But when those 5 sentences are uttered, the door locks. Forever. And there is no key that will open it again, because the trust that allowed it to exist has been destroyed. And Capricorn moves on, a little more alone, a little more convinced that they were right from the start. So here's the question. If you have a Capricorn in your life, are you really seeing that person? Or are you only seeing the surface, the patterns, what's comfortable for you to interpret? Capricorns don't need you to fix them. They need you to understand them. They don't need you to change them. They need you to accept them. They don't need you to break down their walls by force. They need you to be patient enough to wait until they voluntarily open the door. And if you're a Capricorn watching this, I want you to know you're not cold. You're cautious with a heart that's been hurt before. You're not arrogant. You're trying to prove a worth that's always been yours. You're not absent. You're building security in the only way you know how. You're not boring. You carry responsibilities that others can't even imagine. And you won't die alone unless you believe this lie they told you. Capricorn solitude is not destiny. It's a choice born of fear. And fears can be faced when you find someone willing to stay in the shadows with you, instead of forcing you into the light before you're ready. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever said or heard any of these phrases? What was it like? How did you feel? Are you a Capricorn and finally felt understood? Or do you know one and now understand better why certain words caused so much distance? Leave your story in the comments. Share it. Because the more we talk about these invisible pains, the more we create a world where people can be who they truly are without fear of being judged for their protective mechanisms. If this video touched you, if it made you see something you didn't see before, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Whether that person is a Capricorn who needs to feel seen, or someone who loves a Capricorn and wants to understand them better. Because in the end, we're all just trying to be loved for who we are. And Capricorns, perhaps more than any other sign, need that permission. The permission to be enough exactly as they are. Strong and vulnerable. Responsible and scared. Confident and full of doubts. You saw the mountain. Now you know the heart that beats within it. And that changes everything. Until the next video. And remember, understanding is the first step to true love.